Real Talk USA.
It's my house, come on, turn it up.
The hour where the U.S. mission to the African Union comes to you through Afro FM 105.3 to highlight the United States partnership in Africa. Current issues will be discussed. Guests will engage on a variety of topics, ranging from politics to jazz. Co-hosted by EUL Solomon of Afro FM and Chris Meade of USAU. The show will air every Thursday from 4 to 5 p.m. Feel free to participate by sending messages to the USAU social media sites www.usau.usmission.gov or www.facebook.com/USAU and follow USAU on twitter.com/USAU.
Just relax. Welcome to my house.
Real Talk USA.
Welcome to my house. It's my house.
Hello everyone, this is our weekly Real Talk USA show on 105.3 Afro FM, and it's me, EUL Solomon, with Chris Meade. Hi Chris.
Hey EUL, how are you doing?
How are you? How was your weekend?
It was busy with the AU Summit. It's been pretty tough staying on top of everything, but the summit is going pretty well, and it's really a lot of great, look forward to a lot of great outcomes from this summit.
Okay, then today we have special guests here, right?
We do have a special guest. We have Mr. Jonathan Nash, who is with the Millennium Challenge Corporation. Mr. Nash, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Jonathan Nash. I'm the Acting Chief Executive Officer of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, or MCC. MCC is an independent U.S. government agency that has a single mission, a singular focus, and that is to reduce global poverty through private sector-led economic growth. So we're a relatively young agency. We were created in 2004, and over the last 13 years or so, we've invested about $12 billion in various economic development projects around the world. So again, we're working with country partners and helping to put in place solutions and projects that will drive economic growth and put these countries and our partners on a path towards economic growth and self-sufficiency.
Well, thank you for that. And before we get into what the MCC, we want to dig a little deeper into what the MCC is and what it does. What brings you to Addis? Is this your first time to Addis?
It is. This is my first time to Addis, and I'm here to participate in a forum that's co-hosted by the Corporate Council in Africa and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa.
What is the purpose of the conference or the
Well, we're bringing together the public sector and the private sector, U.S. Private sector, African private sector, to look at opportunities to invest together to help deliver solutions for countries here in Africa.
Very good. And so what is the role of, what is MCC?
So MCC is a government agency. We work with poor but well-governed countries around the world. We work with a select group of countries that have demonstrated a commitment to investing in their people, to ruling justly, and promoting economic freedoms. And we provide two kinds of grants. One is a large-scale 5-year grant we call a compact, and these average on anywhere from $100 million to $700 million. We also have a smaller threshold program, and these are for countries that are right on the cusp of qualifying for the larger compacts, and these are grants on the order of $15 to $40 million or so to be implemented over the course of a couple of years. So when a country is selected to work with MCC, the first thing we do is we sit down in partnership with them and we say, okay, what are some of the constraints to economic growth here in your country, and what are some of the sectors that are really poised for growth? And jointly we identify those sectors, and then we jointly identify some projects in those sectors that we think will help reduce the constraints to economic growth. And then once we've agreed to a suite of projects, we will then sign an agreement with the country, and then it's up to the country to actually implement the project. So one of the central tenets of MCC's model is country-led solutions or country ownership. And of course, the countries go about implementing the programs, and we provide technical support and assistance and oversight along the way.
Mr. Nash, you mentioned that poor but well-governed countries are eligible for MCC. Would you call it a sponsorship, donorship grant?
The resources we provide are in the form of a grant, but I like to think of ourselves or the countries that we work with as our partners. We're doing this in partnership with them.
Got it. So when you say poor but well-governed countries are eligible for grants from MCC for partnership with MCC, how does a country how do you define poor but well-governed?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we only invest in countries that are considered low or lower middle income, as defined by the World Bank. And then in terms of determining those that are well-governed, we use a scorecard system. And so every year we produce a scorecard made up of 20 indicators that are monitored by third-party entities like the World Bank or Freedom House or others that, again, take a look at a country's each country's commitment to investing in their people, ruling justly, and promoting economic freedom. So you can take a look at these scorecards. We're very public about countries' performance on the scorecards. They're all on our website, www.mcc.gov. And what we see is that certain countries start to track their performance on these scorecards and make certain improvements, policy reforms, and investments in their country, and they find themselves doing better and better on the scorecard to the point where our board of directors will say, okay, this country is ready to be a partner with MCC.
So are there any countries that MCC is partnering with in Africa?
Yes, we're actually, over the last 13 years, we've partnered with 23 countries in Africa, from Burkina Faso, Cote dIvoire, Ghana, Liberia, Mozambique, Senegal, a whole range of different countries. And in fact, when you look at the almost $12.5 billion we've invested to date, 70% of that has been here in Africa. And when you look at that investment, about 2/3 of that has been in large-scale infrastructure. So roads, airports, transportation projects, logistics, ports, agriculture, energy. So a range of different projects, both large and small, all that we believe will demonstrate that there will be economic growth that will arise and help lift people out of poverty.
So you mentioned some of the large-scale infrastructure projects. Is that the main sector that you're involved in, or are you involved in other sectors as well?
No, so we're involved also in the education sector, financial services. So it just really runs the range of different projects. But again, we're looking to make underlying investments that will drive economic growth and more importantly catalyze additional private sector investment. So when we're investing in energy, it's so that we are working with the country partners to provide more reliable and cost lower cost energy, which will allow businesses to expand growth or to make new investments. We put in roads in areas. It helps farmers get their products to market. So everything that we do, we are trying to provide the underpinnings for private sector-led growth.
So who and how is success measured?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, we take measuring our results very seriously. We work closely with our country partners. 100% of our projects are independently evaluated, and we use the results from those evaluations to inform our current programming. So we also take all the results from those investments, the good, bad, and ugly, things that work, things that didn't work, and we make that all publicly available so that other country partners and other donors, other folks involved in this arena can learn and fine-tune their programs so that we're really investing in what works and we're avoiding investing in things that don't work.
Got it. So what makes MCC innovative?
Well, a couple of things. First, I think the fact that we employ a transparent, competitive selection process. This is what I was just talking about. Our partners need to meet rigorous standards for good governance to qualify for our assistance. Second, we take a very business-like approach with bedrock commitments to data, accountability, cost-benefit analysis. All of our projects have to demonstrate that there's going to be an economic rate of return. So we have a whole suite of investment criteria that we use to determine which projects we're going to invest in, which ones we won't. And finally, we also focus on creating the right circumstances for businesses to invest in our partner countries. So not only are we going in and helping our country partners build roads or transportation, we're also working with them on certain policy and institutional reforms that will create new opportunities or better opportunities for businesses to invest and thrive and grow in these countries. So we take a sector-wide approach. It's not just the hard infrastructure, but we're also helping our country partners take on the needed reforms to ensure sustainability and additional growth in these sectors.
So when I think you touched on this, if you could tell us a little more about how can a country demonstrate that how can a country become eligible for MCC funding?
So it's a great question. Let me give you the example of Cote d'Ivoire. So when President Ouattara came into power after the elections, he picked up MCC scorecard and looked at it, and at the time he saw that Cote d'Ivoire was passing 4 of the 20 indicators. And he said, I'm going to use these 20 indicators as my roadmap to reform in Cote d'Ivoire. And so he put together a team in his front office that was solely dedicated to making the kinds of investment and policy reforms in Cote d'Ivoire to drive improvement on these indicators. And President Ouattara had worked at the IMF, so he was he had enough of he knew macroeconomic theory well enough, and he knew that these indicators that we were tracking were not only good for getting on a path towards qualifying for MCC assistance, but they were just good for the country in general. So what we saw over time was steady progression, and 3 years after he came into power, they were passing enough indicators to be considered as eligible for a threshold program by our board of directors. And so we started working on a program with them at that point. The very next year, they passed 11 indicators. And so to be considered eligible, the starting point is you have to pass at least half of the 20 indicators, more than half the 20 indicators, so 11, as well as passing some of our hard hurdles like a control of corruption indicator. So Cote d'Ivoire didn't stop there. They have now grown, and they improved to 14 indicators. And we just this past year, President Ouattara came to Washington, D.C., and he and I signed a $524 million compact that's going to invest in logistics and transport in and around Abidjan, and will invest in secondary education, a private sector-led technical vocational education training program. And when he came out for the signing, he said in his public remarks, I'm going to be the first president to meet all 20 indicators. So his is an example of where a country, and a leader recognized that making the investments that would drive improvements on the scorecard, one of the upsides is you may qualify for MCC assistance, but it's just good policy for the country. So for us, we tend to look at this as, wow, this was great. It created this incentive in Cote d'Ivoire, and there are all of these benefits to the Ivorian economy and the Ivorian people before we even spent a single dollar in grant funds.
Wow. And it didn't seem like it took very long.
Well, I think Cote d'Ivoire is a bit of a standout case in terms of how quickly they were able to move from passing 4 indicators to passing, over 14 indicators. But that's because they're, the dedicated team and just good leadership. But we've seen that in other countries too, where there's been market improvement.
Very good. You mentioned anti-corruption, and that members have to pass anti-corruption, some sort of an anti-corruption flag. The African Union this year has named this year to be the year of anti-corruption, winning the fight against corruption. Can you talk a little bit more about that particular indicator?
Sure. It's a control of corruption indicator, and again, you can learn more about this specific indicator by going to our website, www.mcc.gov. And this is an indicator that's actually put out by the World Bank. So the World Bank gathers all the data annually, and there are a number of data sources that feed into this control of corruption score or indicator, and we then take those data and take a look at all the countries, and those countries that are doing better than their peers are considered to be passing the control of corruption indicator, so they're above the median in terms of the overall score. So there are about 20 sub-indicators that go into this broader indicator, but we think that this particular indicator is the best measure out there of the extent to which a country is taking steps to control corruption.
Let me ask a stupid question. Why is corruption bad?
Well, I think corruption, the way MCC looks at it is corruption inhibits economic growth. Broad-based, inclusive economic growth. So if a country is not on a path towards controlling corruption, they're missing a lot of opportunities to drive economic growth. And our mission is, again, to reduce poverty through private sector-led economic growth. There are a whole host of reasons why corruption is bad, and others would consider corruption bad. But for us specifically, we believe that countries that are trying to control corruption and putting in place a broader efforts to pursue good governance are those countries that are going to best be able to take advantage of a large-scale investment from MCC and do the right thing with it.
This is a little bit further afield from maybe your expertise, but why does corruption hamper economic growth?
We believe that there are a lot of inefficiencies. If money, particularly money that would be going into the public coffers, is siphoned off, that's less money that a country has to invest in its people and invest in services. Also, when you have lower scale corruption, when people are having to pay bribes on a regular basis, they're not able to use that money. The money that they're paying in bribes, they're not able to use towards nutrition and education and other things that they could invest in for their families. So it's just corruption creates lots of inefficiencies, both at the macro level but at the household level as well.
Got it. Let me ask you about your core values. You have a clever acronym, CLEAR. You say our values are clear, and it's CLEAR. And C is for collaboration, L is for learning, E is for excellence, A is accountability, and R is respect for individuals and ideas. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. A few years back, MCC staff got together and went through a process to articulate what our core values were and the values that we wanted to embody as we went about engaging with our partners and engaging with each other and engaging with outside stakeholders in carrying out our work. So that's where we came up with these. And again, I'll just repeat them for you. And it's embrace collaboration, where we believe that working together towards clear common goals is important, particularly with the spirit of creativity and teamwork. We're always learning. This is refers back to what I mentioned earlier about all of our projects are evaluated, and we take on that learning. We don't try to hide failure. We try to learn from failure, and we work with our country partners to learn for that as well. We question assumptions and seek to understand what works and what doesn't work. The third one is practice excellent. We would like to see ourselves as a leader in global development. We want to see our country partners and those that we're working with as leaders. We want to help build their capacity going forward so that when we leave, there's a cadre of professional staff that sees the benefits of carrying out projects and doing project execution at a higher bar in these countries. Fourth, we want to be accountable. We want to hold ourselves accountable for delivering results. We want to hold our country partners accountable for following through on their commitments and delivering results to their people. And then finally, respect individuals and ideas. And again, I think this gets back to the fact that we never walk into a situation and believe that we have all the answers as MCC. We first turn to our country partners and learn from them and try to understand what their development priorities are and what we could do to help them accomplish those development priorities.
Well, before we went on air, we were talking about success stories, MCC success stories, and I think this ties into your last, the R in clear for your values about respect.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a story about that you told us before we went on air about a success story?
Sure, yeah, and the story that I'll tell is just one little story of what I would consider to be hundreds of thousands of similar stories throughout the MCC portfolio. To date, that almost the $12.5 billion we've invested to date, we anticipate will benefit 175 million people in our partner countries. So there are a lot of people that are being touched by the work that we're doing and that will benefit from these projects and hopefully experience economic growth and reduction in poverty at the household level. But one of the things that's important to us is inclusive growth. and that we never inadvertently create poverty for some in the name of trying to advance a project to reduce poverty for others. So oftentimes when we're investing in large-scale infrastructure, we are required to acquire new land or expand the footprint of a particular project, a road. If we're widening a road or if we're putting a power transmission line, we need access to land. And as you all know, oftentimes people are living on that land or using that land for productive purposes. So instead of just going in and seeing these people who are in the way of a project as obstacles, instead we work with our country partners to see those individuals as partners in the project. And we go in there with respect, and we work with these individuals to find alternatives for them, livelihood alternatives, or places where we could relocate them. And I was telling you a story earlier about a particular favorite project of mine in Honduras, a country in Central America that had received about a $227 million or thereabouts grant, and the primary project was to expand a highway between the economic capital and the political capital of the country. And the idea was to try to reduce the cost of transportation and create more opportunities for growth, allow people to access public services, and farmers to access markets in a cheaper and quicker fashion. But there were a lot of people living alongside this road that we had to expand. So we spent a lot of time working with our partners in Honduras to go along and treat each one of those families and individuals with respect and find solutions for them. And in fact, what we ended up doing was a lot of these people were living individually along the road, and we grouped them together into communities and provided them, many of them for the first time, basic services like power. Well, first of all, housing, and power and water and other social services. In a couple of the larger communities, we also built schools and brought in the Ministry of Education. So really improved the livelihoods of these individuals who, were already living on the margins of society, already living on the side of the road, and had been accustomed to being kind of disrespected over time. And the fact that we went in there and saw them as project partners and gave them opportunities to help lift themselves out of poverty, for them that was something that was new for them. So the story I was telling, and one of the great honors that I've had at MCC early in my career was one of these communities ended up naming their school after me, and I was floored. But I was told afterwards it was because it wasn't me. It was my, country partners, the broader team of us at work. But it was the first time that these individuals had really been treated with respect, and they saw how hard we were fighting for them to get access to water and power, and they saw that we helped them rebuild their market stalls. And now it's great to go back to Honduras and you see these little communities thriving and these markets and businesses expanding, and families having much more or greater degree of household income. So for me, it was a kind of an early personal success story, but that specific example that I just mentioned has played out numerous times in our compact countries. So we also have reports on all of our compacts and what we've done in terms of both anecdotes like that, but also just broader analysis around the actual economic growth that our projects have driven in some of these communities, and that's all available on our website.
Very good. Mr. Nash, I want to follow up on something. When you mentioned, so MCC is a public-private partnership. MCC partners with countries to provide opportunities for development for the countries involved. You mentioned Ghana. If I am a company, an enterprise in Ghana, and I want to get a contract with MCC, how would I go about it? Is it closed to just American companies? Or how can you describe a little bit about the procurement process and how a company would go about getting a contract?
Sure. So in this, earlier I mentioned the central tenet of MCC being country ownership or country-led solutions. So once we sign an agreement with a country for a particular suite of projects, either it's a compact or threshold program, that country will set up an implementation unit. Typically it's called, for example, Millennium Challenge Account Malawi or Millennium Challenge Account Senegal. And this is the entity that actually will run the procurement processes using MCC's procurement guidelines. So if you're a Ghanaian business wanting to do work on an MCC-funded project, you're actually going to participate in a procurement process that's run by that entity in Ghana. And what we have seen time and again in these countries is that local companies or regional companies successfully win contracts through these procurement processes. And that's because we ensure that our country partners are running transparent, free procurements that are not rigged. We have outside independent observers on these panels. MCC evaluates the work that these panels do. So we always want to make sure our country partners are selecting the best companies that will deliver the projects at the best value. So it's not always the cheapest company, but it's the company that's going to deliver the best, most sustainable solution for whatever particular project it is the country's bidding on. So we require that the implementing units advertise broadly in the local media, but also we post all these opportunities on our own website. We have a Work With Us page on our website, mcc.gov, where you can see a listing of all of our procurement opportunities across our entire portfolio. You also see a business forecast there where you can see 6, 12 months out what are some of the procurements that are coming down the road. But we believe that not only do our procurement processes open up opportunities for local businesses, because this is not just tied back to only American firms can participate in this. We have a level playing field, so no preferences for U.S. firms, no preferences for domestic firms. It's a level playing field. So we want the best ideas, the best solutions to be put out on the table, and then our country partners will select those through a transparent, fair procurement process.
Well, look, what is your main message to participants at the Corporate Council on Africa Forum?
Well, for us, we just want to make sure that both the African private sector and the U.S. private sector are aware of our investments and opportunities to participate in procurements with our country partners, but also more importantly to leverage our investments and to partner alongside of us and invest alongside of us. We are very proud of what our country partners in Africa have done over the last 12 years. We're very excited about what's coming down the pike in terms of the programs that are just coming online. We're working with Senegal, Burkina Faso, Tunisia on new compact programs. We've launched a program in Ghana, in Benin. So there are lots of opportunities out there, and we see our country partners doing amazing things. We're very excited about the growth potential in Africa. We've had tremendous experience here. So for us, we want to serve as a bridge for U.S. companies that want to come in and invest in Africa, and then we also want to make sure that African businesses are aware of opportunities to partner with us and to partner with the U.S. private sector as well.
So are there any exemplary projects that are in Africa that you're doing on?
Yeah, we're very excited about what we've done in Africa and what's coming down the pike. One sector that where we've seen a lot of growth is in the energy sector, and so we all know that one of the major obstacles of poverty reduction is electricity supply, particularly supply of electricity that's inefficient, unreliable, or unaffordable. So we've got a number of power-related projects, and I'll highlight just a couple. In Ghana, we have a $498 million compact that's focused on the power sector. We're supporting the government of Ghana's efforts to overhaul the entire sector. We're making a big investment in the main utility there in Accra, and are working with the government to bring in a private sector operator on a concession basis to help put the utility on more commercial footing. And that private sector operator will bring in additional $500 million of investment. We're working to overhaul the entire sector, which we believe will give the private sector, particularly independent power producers, the confidence to invest. So we've heard from a number of private sector players that, as the government of Ghana undertakes these reforms and as the compact goes forward, that they're going to be investing several $billion in new projects. So we're pretty excited about what the government of Ghana is doing to date. In Liberia, we're working with a couple of other donors to rehabilitate the Mount Coffee hydropower project, which is the primary source of power in Liberia. As you may know, Liberia has one of the highest cost of power in the country, and it's really limited growth. So bringing Mount Coffee back online is going to have a really transformative impact in Liberia. In Benin, MCC's investments there in the power sector are focused on crowding in and mobilizing commercial finance to increase investments in both on-grid and off-grid power sources. We've got a program there where we're going to be providing matching funds in the private sector to get them to bring in renewable and off-grid power sources for remote areas in Benin, as well as to invest in some on-grid investments as well. We've also got power projects in Malawi and Sierra Leone, and we're currently developing a new one in Senegal. So we've seen tremendous growth in projects in the energy sector. In terms of countries, we've seen a tremendous growth in our investments in West Africa. In earlier years at MCC, we invested a lot in East and Southern Africa and also Northern Africa and Morocco. But in recent years, West Africa has really come out as kind of the region where we're experiencing a lot of growth.
Okay, well, Mr. Nash, thank you for your time. Do you have any final last words, or anything else that we didn't bring out of the interview you'd like the audience to know?
Well, I just really appreciate having the opportunity to have this conversation, and hope people can learn more about MCC. And again, head to our website, mcc.gov.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Real Talk USA.
It's my house, come on, turn it up.
The hour where the U.S. mission to the African Union comes to you through Afro FM 105.3 to highlight the United States partnership in Africa. Current issues will be discussed. Guests will engage on a variety of topics, ranging from politics to jazz. Co-hosted by EUL Solomon of Afro FM and Chris Meade of USAU. The show will air every Thursday from 4 to 5 p.m. Feel free to participate by sending messages to the USAU social media sites www.usau.usmission.gov or www.facebook.com/USAU and follow USAU on twitter.com/USAU.
Just relax. Welcome to my house.
Real Talk USA.
Welcome to my house. It's my house.